Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we are diving headfirst into the virtual arena. We're going to tackle a huge question about the future of competitive gaming. Is VR esports actually the next big thing, or is it going to be stuck on the sidelines forever?
Okay, let's kick things off with a number that pretty much defines modern esports, $75 million. Yeah, you heard that right. That's the record-breaking, life-changing prize pool for this year's Esports World Cup. We're talking about the absolute peak, the very top of competitive gaming.
And of course, all the biggest names are there. You've got your Titans, Valorant, Dota 2, League of Legends, all battling it out for these insane multi-million-dollar prizes. But take a look. You'll notice one category, one entire genre of gaming is just not there.
And that right there, that absence, it brings us to the big question we're tackling in this explainer. Is VR esports some kind of sleeping giant? Just building up its power behind the scenes? Or is it a cool niche that maybe missed its shot at the big leagues?
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we're going to dig into that $75 million question. Then, we'll map out where these VR pros are actually competing. After that, we'll get into the money, or lack thereof, and look at the huge financial gap. We'll figure out what's holding it back, and finally, we'll ask, what's the next reality?
All right, first things first. Let's really get into that $75 million question. Because to understand why VR isn't on that list, we've got to set the stage. We need to define what we're even talking about, and what makes competitive VR so different in the first place.
See, this isn't like your typical esports, right? That's all about lightning-fast reflexes on a mouse and keyboard. VR esports, that's a whole different beast. It's a full-body experience. We're talking about real physical skill, spatial awareness, and moving your body tactically in a 3D world. Honestly, it's as much an athletic competition as it is a gaming one.
And this scene didn't just pop up overnight. Nope. It's been a slow, steady climb for about a decade now. It all started back in 2016 with super passionate fans creating their own leagues. Then it got a bit more serious with some sponsored tournaments. But the real game changer? That was the MetaQuest headset in 2020, which just opened the floodgates for new players. And all of that brings us to today, where the whole scene has really split into two distinct models. Okay, so if these guys aren't competing at the World Cup, where are they? Where does competitive VR actually happen? Let's go map out the real proving grounds. Right now, the scene is basically split down the middle into two very different worlds. First, you've got the VR Master League, the VML. Think of this as the grassroots community-run league where people compete from home. Then you've got something totally different, Esports Virtual Arenas, or EVA. This is a newer, franchise-based model where players physically go to these huge arenas to compete.
And in the VRML, there are a few games that are just pillars of the community. You've got Onward, which is kind of the OG milsim that really kicked things off. Then there's Pavlov, a huge community favorite, basically VR's answer to Counter-Strike. But the one making all the noise right now, that's got to be Breachers. It's a 5v5 tactical shooter, and it is absolutely the league's biggest growth story, pulling in dedicated players from everywhere.
All right, let's talk about the big one, the money. We started this whole thing with that insane $75 million number. So how do the prize pools in VR even begin to stack up?
And, well, just look at this. The scale of this gap is just breathtaking. A typical game at the Esports World Cup is competing for a $2 million prize pool. $2 million. Now look at VR. The top-tier EVA Pro League, $54,000. And Breachers, the hottest game in the VRML, $10,000. We're not just talking about a small difference here. This is a completely different universe.
So yeah, this pretty much says it all, doesn't it? The passion is there, the organization is there, but financially, VR esports is playing a whole different ballgame. So why? I mean, that's the million-dollar question, or maybe the $75 million question. Why is this gap so huge? Well, it really boils down to three fundamental problems that are holding VR esports back. And check out this quote from a pro player, because it nails the first two problems perfectly in one go. He's talking about the hardware he uses, but listen closely to what it reveals.
So let's break that down. Problem 1, hardware. A super expensive headset can literally give you a competitive edge. It's not a level playing field. Problem 2, the spectator experience. The very thing that makes VR feel so incredible for the player, that total immersion, makes it really hard to watch on a 2D screen. And problem 3, financial stability. The studios making these games are often running on fumes, which makes it a huge risk for them to pour millions into building out a pro league.
And if you want a perfect example of this, just look at the story of AX Lab, the team behind Veil VR. This is a cautionary tale. They started with high hopes, raised over $15 million, but then the reality hit. They burned through cash, reporting huge losses. They had this massive valuation on paper that was nowhere near the actual revenue. And now, they're trying to raise another $5 million just to, and I quote, keep the wheels from falling off. It just shows you how brutal this space can be.
Okay, so things look a little tough, but don't count VR esports out just yet. The story is definitely not over. There are some really powerful trends bubbling under the surface that could completely change the game. So let's look at what that next reality might actually be.
So where's the hope? Well, according to MetaZone data, it's all about the audience. See, you have your hardcore VR elites, and that group is pretty stable, but it's not really growing. But the real story is the teens. These kids are VR native. They've grown up with it. They are by far the most active group, and that segment is just exploding. This is your next generation of pro players, right here.
And where are all these teens hanging out? Well, a lot of them are in a little game called Gorilla Tag. And when I say a lot, I mean over 3 million active users every single month. That number doesn't just beat the current competitive games, it absolutely dwarfs them. You have to understand, this isn't just a casual game. It's a gigantic, completely untapped talent pool for the future of VR esports.
So what has to happen for VR esports to really take off? The path forward is pretty clear, even if it's not easy. You can think of it like a checklist. First, they've got to figure out hardware standardization, so it's about skill, not your wallet. They need way better tools to make it fun to watch. The developers need to find business models that actually work long-term. And the biggest one of all, they have to build a bridge to convert all those millions of kids playing Gorilla Tag into the next generation of competitive superstars.
So, all the pieces are there. You've got the passion, the growing player base, the technology, but the future is still anyone's guess. And that leaves us with one final question, and this one's for you. After seeing all this, what do you think? Will VR esports finally have its mainstream moment? Or will it stay a passionate, awesome, but ultimately small niche? The next few years are going to be crucial.